Hello, my name is Troy Adu here,
I'm Tyler Hoskins.
and you're listening to our Sick Ass podcast. Kia ora, and welcome to another guest episode of the Sick Ass podcast. Today's guest, you're in for a really big treat right now because this is the first time we are using the new gear. So not only are we going to sound better, but by the end of this, you will have a better appreciation for what it is to be able to harness your mind and almost make you unstoppable. I'd say I'm using this as a therapy session, but also in a selfish pursuit, really, to learn a lot more about the way that this guy goes about everything that he does, to just be the best that he can be at everything that he does. And I just remember the first time I met him. Actually, it was one of the first times I met him, and we were at our good friend Tim Medlicott, who was episode 1. We were at his gym, and now CrossFit was my thing for quite a while. The first lunchtime session that I had with this young man, he kept up with me the whole time. And then I find out he hasn't really been doing CrossFit for too long. And then he passes me on the run. I thought, this guy must have been doing CrossFit for a while. And then I find out it was his second week. And I said, there is something in this guy. So just before we go too far with me just telling you about how physically gifted and mentally gifted this young man is, we have Stephen Booth in the building. Thank you so much for coming in, bro.
Thanks for having me, Troy, and that's a great introduction, mate. I didn't know that was coming, so
mate,
what a pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we get people on is obviously because I see potential in the types of people that come on, and I know that people can learn a lot from you.
Yeah.
And speaking of learning a lot, you know, you were someone who, the first time we spoke and you told me about your upbringing, I actually probably fell for stereotypes a little bit because I assumed you were from elsewhere, and I assumed you had another upbringing than the one that you did have, and I was taken aback when you did tell me about that. So if you could just touch on that a little bit, and we can get into it.
Yeah. Okay, so starting back into our memory, that was over that coffee date, wasn't it?
And it sure was.
Cool. So, a lot of people think I'm from Dunedin, Stephen from Dunedin, right? It just has a nice ring to it, but I'm not. I'm bred South Auckland, and so I had some pretty decent exposure to a low socioeconomic environment and what can kind of go on in the neighbourhood. Again, there was nothing so bad at school. I've heard of like some pretty nasty bullying that happens, but mine was more so in the immediate area that I lived. So I'd travel quite a far distance to get to a school. It was my dad's idea that if I went to a nicer school there, I'd avoid a lot of the stuff that he encountered. But no, there was still theft. I had my skateboard stolen from me on my way home, my bike.
Sure.
Yeah, went to get a birthday present out of the garage and the back window was smashed and the bike was gone. And, my dad's like, I swear there was a present in here. But that's just the type of stuff that, it was kind of normalized for, Home I Station, Browns Road, that type of stuff. And yeah, there was from a reasonably young age, I could be attacked in schools for just walking through public property, right? So I'd have, being told that it was, their place, I shouldn't be there. And, if you say anything along the lines of, it's a free world, I'm just getting from A to B, it was, I was getting attacked by a couple of guys. So yeah, I don't know if anything was kind of left intrinsically inside me after that, but I always valued being able to defend yourself on a front.
Yeah, and just on that, I mean, what does that do? I mean, because you're quite young and you kind of have that fear. I mean, there's some people who can fear. Yeah, you have that fear. And what does it actually do to your sense of security or just as a person?
Yeah, I mean, it just it exposes you to a different life that people don't really know exists. And again, it's all about your upbringing to what you are exposed to and what you hear about. But some people can go happily through their whole childhood, their whole teenage years, and they can never experience anything quite am I going to get my ass whooped today type thing. But it's a very, very real thing, and especially up in areas where my best mate's from in Flaxmere. South Auckland's obviously known well. There's lots of places around where people experience it, but it does leave a memorable experience in your brain, but you can kind of adjust to it and leave it behind you, right, as you get older. It's nothing too scarring. It's not David Goggins type stuff, right? Yeah. You just adapt to it, and you know it's a part of life that people either do or don't experience.
So it's an extremely resilient, I guess, mentality. So for some people, I don't think you know, some people it does weigh on them a little bit heavier, but you were able to move past that. And then out of Auckland, you actually came down and did a stint of high school down in Dunedin, right? So this is when Stephen from Dunedin, if it does become a thing, kind of around your secondary school age, I think a little bit of intermediate, but not really.
Yeah, I moved down here. I should have gone to intermediate down here, but I think I just stuck my heels in and said I'm not starting a school like 2 months out. So I missed like two terms of year 8. And then I went to high school 2003, where we started at Logan Park and went all the way through. And that was good, man. I started to get some more confidence back through that. I also moved to Cromwell for a year as well. But that was like a blip on the radar. I don't really remember much of that. I just remember playing rugby and then suddenly having friends. But I didn't really know anyone there, and I don't really keep in touch with anyone from that time. But when I was in Dunedin, it was pretty much just like getting back into that how kind of life can be lived differently. It was easy to get around, man. I could go from when I was competent age to get stuff done by myself. I could go to school. I could then go to rugby training by myself. I could go to athletics by myself. I could make my way home. It was like, oh, this is a city, but it's not really. Everything's close enough to get stuff done, right? So I was really happy in Dunedin throughout high school. Yeah.
And then so you got through. You did your usual Kiwi child going through high school thing. You did your NCEA, or you did your exams and whatnot. You went through level 1, 2, and then apparently in year 13 you went slightly different from the regular path. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So I had the option of going to get level 3 or do something called the Services Academy, and it was run out of Logan Park. I think it's one of the worst decisions that the education sector's made in New Zealand to get rid of these courses.
Oh, to get rid of it?
They got rid of the Services Academy. Right. It's no longer run there. But the course was for 16 to 18-year-olds. And instead of doing NCA level 3, or actually there were people doing NCA level 1 and 2, and they were getting credits. But you didn't have any options to get your level 3 credits. But what you did gain is you gained a whole bunch of mental discipline, physical capabilities, and like just untouched raw potential within teenagers that people didn't like. I didn't know it existed. So like, what were we doing, right? We were basically being taught how to go into one of the services: the police, the fire, the army, the navy, the air force, something like that, right? So they did it on a kind of high school level. But when we went to the army and we spent time at like West Mountain, Burnham, we had military skills courses for like weeks on the west coast in the snow. We were sleeping outside. Like, we did very, very specific military style training with military staff that didn't seem to care that we were high school kids. Honestly, they didn't. Like, we hiked up this mountain and it was hot, man. We were sweating. We were ripping layers off. We were packing our bags full with gear. And then we got to the top of this mountain and they said, right, put your bags down, take a step away from them. You're not touching them for 24 hours. God. And we're just like, we're skinny teenagers, 17. We're looking around like, but my food's in that bag. Like, how am I going to survive the night? And they basically gave us a plastic rubbish bag and a machete, and we were off making our huts and had to start fires and all sorts of stuff. But it was really cool. Like, it was a great experience. We did the coast to coast. We got swept away in rivers, did the rail trail. And you basically, at the very end of it, we've done the coast to coast for 3 days, right? We've been biking, running, rafting down this river, and we're all dead tired. And the day after that, they ran this like mini SAS endurance day for us. Jeez. We're all wrecked, man, and they get us out of bed at 4 a.m, bashing pots, acting like we're getting bloody attacked by the Taliban, and we're outside, jumping in the pool, swimming laps, no breakfast, running 2.4 k's as fast as we can, and then just bringing a whole bunch of stuff for us to carry, like ropes, tires, jerry cans full of water, and like nothing. There's no way that you can divide the stuff equally between the team members. So someone's got a tie around their neck and it's cocking their head on an angle, and you're carrying all the stuff. And it was a race between schools because there were 4 services academies.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So we were the only, well, no, not the only South Island one. There was the only Dunedin one. There was also one in Linwood, Christchurch. Can't remember the other. I think I should remember the other 2, but I can't. And yeah, so it was just like a race where like everyone dug deep because you're only as fast as your slowest member.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if I take off and go and win it. It doesn't count for anything. I've got to carry bags for other people, and you try and lighten their load so that everyone can move at the same pace. And it was a really good, conclusive team environment where you could actually see people breaking mentally.
Sure.
But then see them pulling themselves back in.
Right.
Like, no, yeah, I remember it's like, I can't go on. My feet are sore. And we're just like, come on, man. Like pushing them, literally pushing people. And these teenagers just refusing to move. And we're like, just get up the hill. We're in a race, like type thing. So it was cool.
Did you find during that you kind of naturally took a leadership position?
I think I took one more so than I wanted to.
Right.
I didn't sign up for the advanced leadership courses that were available. I wasn't interested in those. But when it came to trying to win something, I was like, shit, move your ass type thing. Like, what can we do? We actually emptied people's bags into my bag. And also Sean Wilson, he gets a shout out for this as well, because I remember stuffing sleeping bags in his bag and we were just carrying other people's shit. Like we had 2 bags on our backs, 1 bag on the back and 1 bag on the front. And these are like 35 kilo bags, like army style bags. And like we thought we were getting muscles, but we were getting bruises. Like we had welts on our shoulders and our traps from carrying stuff. We were carrying logs and all sorts of nasty things. So it was a great time. Great year.
And prior to that point, had you been through anything that kind of pushed you to that point where you're like, I can push through discomfort, I am a winner type thing? Or was this the first time you'd shown to yourself that you have that in you?
No, that was probably the second real time. The first time I decided I was going to win a beep test. And I was a pretty fat kid. I was 13, I was overweight, and I decided that I was going to come back next year and win it. And so I exercised. First run I ever did was like running in bare feet for 16 kilometers with my dad. He thought it was a great idea. It was a terrible idea. My feet were wrecked. But that's how you kind of jump in the deep end. And then I came back, and I think in 5th form, I told Stanley Coker, shout out to that guy, and I was like, I'm gonna beat you. I'm gonna beat your ass at this beep test. And he was this fit basketball player. I didn't have a chance in hell, but I realized it was a mental game, right?
Yeah.
And I was already in his head. Like he just stopped. Like we both could have kept going, but he was like, screw this, Steven's not gonna stop. And I was like, well, I actually won. Like I didn't expect to win that. But so that was kind of the first time I kind of got a taste of what you can do if you just refuse to quit. Right. Just keep going. The teacher stopped the tape because I refused to stop running. So I was like, okay, we'll just end it here then.
Yeah. So when you finished that, I mean, so you've shown multiple kind of feats of you just being like, if I want to stop, I can stop. But if I don't want to, I've got that last, there's about 50-60% left in me, and it's my mind telling me now that I want to stop. But physiologically, I probably can keep going. But that's not what's going through your mind. No. In your mind, you're just like, keep going. And if I don't die, it's like Ivan Drago, just if he dies, he dies. But you're just going through that.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people, like you were talking about that SEAL who was saying like your brain tells you to quit at 40%. Yep. You've actually got a whole lot more. It's like, it didn't surprise me when I heard that. It's like because you're listening to your brain telling you to stop all the time. It's just you choose to ignore it or you choose to keep going, right? You choose to listen to it or ignore it. Makes sense, right? And so I always had that kind of in my head that I could push through stuff that was uncomfortable. It was quite a natural thing as a teenager for me. But where I really flicked the switch was when I started going into my 19, 20, 21-year-old days, and I ran 8 3,000 meter peaks in 10 days, and I started trying to like me and my dad cycled New Zealand from Bluff to Cape Reinga. We just set goals for ourselves. And it was like, so what can you really? What's the next adventure? What can you add on, and what's the next goal? And it was really, for me, it was kind of just like ticking off things that seemed challenging. Yeah. And they were fun. Like, you got to be having fun while you're doing it.
Absolutely.
It's just painful.
And when you get to that bucket list sort of thing, and when you start to see, because relative to what you've already done, things start looking like doable. Because like you've done this, then the next progression is to do that. The next progression is to do that. And you're slowly ticking them off, and you're proving to yourself over and over and over again. And that all just started from you starting at some point, you know?
Yeah.
So like now, I mean, I don't know what else you can do, to be honest, from there, but like to hone your craft and different things. So honing your craft, I mean, research wise, you have kind of gone back. So you did a stint of teaching, and then you actually wanted to get into honing a martial art that you're into, but we'll get to that shortly. But you did a strength and conditioning or a postgrad diploma at the Otago Polytechnic, and you were pretty lucky because you got to focus on something that is quite close to you and something that you love, and you got to get better at that craft. So do you want to just tell us about, why you got into that study?
Yeah. So I originally, my goal was to work on training combat athletes. That was my original goal. And then I started getting selfish. And I set my sights on trying to be like the first New Zealander to go and win something at ADCC, which is like the Jiu Jitsu Grappling Olympics. And to this day, I only think that one person from New Zealand has gone to the trials to get into that team. And so that's still on my plate, right? I've still got my eyes on that. The date's December 5th is circled on my whiteboard, you know. So that was the goal, to work out basically, because people were training very, very basically. They were just doing generic, you know, like a kind of like a bodybuilder regime, 4x12, chest, triceps. And it's like, you're never going to get the sport specific training that you need unless you can A, research what's being done with the professionals in that industry, and then like B, you have to apply it to yourself and go and test it. And as I was going through this course, it was really great because Matt Blair gave me the full scope to have all of my practicums through the gym. So every time that I did something, I catered it to either jiu-jitsu, wrestling, or MMA. And so I experienced quite a lot of like, oh, this is how this should actually be done. I need balance. I need explosive strength. I need to be basically pushing this bar as fast as I can every time I move it. And then I've also got to work this isometric factor because I need to hold on to people and squeeze them and know when to relax. And so there was like just a whole range. I remember somebody saying like MMA must be one of the hardest things to create a strength and conditioning program for, because who knows if the fight's going to go on for 5 rounds of 5 minutes, or you're going to get a flash knockout or a submission like that. So it's very, very hard to train those athletes.
Yeah. And when you first got into the study and when you started, you know, maybe digging into the literature a little bit and just starting to see, you know, what was available at that point?
Yeah, there's quite a bit. There's a good dude called Phil Daru, and he, I think he's kind of, like, he's famous for who he's coaching and the UFC athletes and stuff like that. But he was the first person that kind of seemed to put his stuff online on YouTube, and that you could go and like really get some pretty accurate like techniques and specific sport exercises for combat sport to just cross over. And I just started picking them up and added them to my game, and then suddenly I was like, well, I wouldn't put it all down to that, but I was actually getting injured less. Like, you know, your body takes quite a beating when you're dealing with, like, you know, resisting human beings trying to use their body weight and their skill to effectively choke you out or, you know, break one of your limbs. So your body's usually getting torqued and twisted. And so the strength and conditioning specifically for combat sport prepares your body for what it has to go through. And all of a sudden I wasn't getting injured as much, so I can train more, harder, and I was starting to find more growth in that industry as well. And I was like, oh, this is knowledge that I'm going to keep for myself right now and just keep going for this.
Yeah, and what were the biggest changes that you started making to your training as you started to, I guess, pick up a little bit more of what was going on, understanding the systems that you needed to start incorporating?
Yeah. It's very difficult. It was very difficult for me.
Yeah.
It was a big switch because, you know, you've got this mindset that you can just keep going, right? But you need to stop.
Sure.
Yeah, you need to go, hey, I'm only going to do reps of 3 for this. Even though I could drop the weight down and keep pumping out some drop sets or do whatever, it's like my focus is speed or strength. Take a chill pill, don't go so hard, and prioritize your combat sport training. So I started to actually kind of use the strength and conditioning side of it to just kind of supplement the combat training.
Sure.
Whereas before it was always like, try and be the fittest, try and be the fastest, try and be the strongest. I should probably get some swimming in there. Try and chuck everything in there. It's too much, right? Your focus needs to be what your priority is.
Yeah.
And so everything else is secondary to that.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest change I made.
Yeah.
Train smarter rather than harder.
Nice. It's just like when anyone gets into CrossFit for the first time and they realize, like, I need to be good at gymnastics, I need to be good at weightlifting, I need to be good at running, all these sorts of things. And then instead of being like, I'm going to periodize it so that I can do this there, and then I'll do a block of that, maintain that, block of that, maintain that. It's like everything, like every single day is like boom, 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 boom. And you're not actually getting better at anything. You're just kind of coasting, maybe getting slightly worse at everything over time.
Yeah. And you're definitely putting yourself into a state of overtraining, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then it's like, how much can you apply of your energy and your ability to that thing that you probably need to focus on, or should be the focus for that area?
Sure.
Yeah. CrossFit's a great example, right? Yeah. Like, I think people discredit a lot of the stuff that those athletes are capable of doing because they've mastered the technique. Even when you master the technique, it's still bloody hard to, like toe to bars, for example. You know, like the first time I ever tried to do that, I was like, this is an impossible movement. I was like, my toes cannot touch this bar. And then you start to kind of learn the motion, and it makes the movement possible, but it's still an incredibly athletic movement. You have to be able to perform the prerequisites before you can even rep it out.
Yeah.
And it's like, Yeah, I think a lot of people could learn a decent amount from what their body's capable of by taking up some CrossFit.
Sure, yeah, and in Jiu Jitsu as well. And there's a lot of things in that grappling or that just being in that environment even where you start to learn just more about yourselves, which I think a lot of people don't ever do in their entire life, which is quite sad. But when I think about conditioning as well, it's being able to perform accurately, but in fatigued states or pretty much any state that you can. So you're like pushing to some certain level where when people think about conditioning, a lot of it, I mean, you were talking about this before where you had to pull back on some things. Conditioning is, not always being above 90% heart rate and just push. Conditioning is being able to control your heart rate, bring it down when it needs to, go back up when it needs to, and then always being in a state of control, and accurate with that. And that's where we can kind of come into now your love for Jiu Jitsu and how that transfers into nearly everything that you do. So have there been, what have been the biggest lessons or what are the biggest principles that you kind of follow being a, Jiu Jitsu practitioner?
Okay, so I guess the first thing that I learned was that, holy crap, it works. I think, like my experience with it going into it was like, I'd been shown some moves or I'd been told that somebody trained Jiu Jitsu, but really they'd done like 6 months training and they were just beating me up in the lounge and it wasn't all that effective, you know what I mean? So when you actually get exposed to the level of skill that a good, competent jiu-jitsu competitor has, you are completely out of your realm of comfort. It's like this person is moving around my body effortlessly. They're in a position to kind of put me to sleep at will. I have to tap, or they can bend my body in a way that something's going to break. Ligaments will rip, bones will dislocate. So you have to first have that ability to say, crap, it works, tap, and try and learn. Okay, and that's kind of like the crossroads, right? When people get exposed to how powerful it is, they either go, yep, this is for me, I need this in my life, or they say, I never want to go through that again.
Right.
It's either it was too much on the ego or just the fear of that actually working on them, that it wasn't for them, okay? So that was the first thing that I kind of found out about it. But for me, I needed it. My first experience was, again, I was reasonably athletic, and I ended up rolling a 19-year-old, 70-kilo teenager.
Sure.
And he strangled me in my eye. I refused to tap, and my eye blood vessels burst.
Damn.
And I ended up started going out, so I tapped. And I was like, I should have tapped a little bit earlier, right? So, and then one of my next experiences was I came back post-rugby league, and I was quite strong. I was about 90 kilo. I thought that I could out-muscle some people. Same thing happened. This kid triangled me. He wrapped his legs around my shoulder and my neck and started squeezing, and I had no idea what to do. So I had to tap or I was going to go to sleep. So yeah, really, like in terms of like how you can deal with that and what direction to take that in, it's entirely up to the individual. I think that where a lot of jiu-jitsu coaches go wrong is that they try to water down the jiu-jitsu, or they try and make it seem like softer than it should be, so that they can get more attention of new members.
Right.
I think people need to know that it's a hard sport. It's hard to get good at. You have to invest a lot of time into it, and it's going to kind of suck for your first however long it takes you to get to a competent level. But it's okay that it's hard. If I take you into the room and we have jiu-jitsu fun, and you get your ass kicked, but you know that it's good for your soul, you're going to come back tomorrow.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if it's hard for you. It doesn't matter. People will still come back, and I feel like that's where a lot of the coaches are kind of going wrong. They're being like, hey, just take it a bit easier and don't go so hard. But it's like people need to be able to go hard. Otherwise, they're never going to have the experience getting it to work on somebody who's resisting. And then their brain is obviously set in that, not fight or flight response, but they should be able to, in a competitive environment, think clearly.
Yeah.
But if they've never been exposed to a competitive environment, their red brain kicks in and all their pathways in their brain shut down, and all these jiu-jitsu techniques that they spend hours trying to memorize doesn't count for anything.
Yeah.
Because they can't pull it out.
Exactly. Yeah. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and we were talking about how people on the front line, or people who have to come, pretty much be with conflict, or at some point of their life will have to go through conflict. And this could, especially with what's happening in our recent eras where people are just pulling guns out now because people don't know how to handle situations of confrontation. And, not that I'm do much jiu-jitsu at all, but I remember the times that I've been in there, it's almost being comfortable being uncomfortable and being like, yes, my head, I mean, I could get put to sleep right now, but the worst thing I can do right now is to just go chaotic.
Yes.
Because I need to be able to just relax, breathe, compose, see what's going on, and then put something into action. Whereas some of these people who are they may get trained a little bit, and I haven't done any police training or anything, so if anyone's out there and saying like, you don't know what you're talking about, sorry, but what I think is, if these people had this more often, they'd probably be in a better place. And I think that's something that comes across in a lot of your teachings.
Yes. Yeah, I've trained with a few police officers, and again, they're doing it for all the right reasons. They're like, I want to learn how to effectively control the space around a resisting opponent and ultimately be able to put someone out if I need to. But you're spot on. Like, people need that experience in those high pressure, high conflict situations so that they can actually, it needs to be safe, obviously. You can't, to quote Josh Fallon, he's like, if we got into a real fight, I'd be gouging your eyes and jacking you in the throat. It's like, of course you're going to be doing that. It's a real fight. Like, if it was a self-defense situation, I'm going to be doing that to you too. I'm just going to be doing jiu-jitsu at the same time. And he stopped and he's like, oh yeah. It's kind of like a good learning moment, whereas it's like, yeah, no, you're spot on. I think people also in general, when jiu-jitsu becomes a habit for them, they don't get so uptight and on edge with everything in their life, right? Like, we get to go and tap into this kind of primitive nature where we're allowed to wrestle people to the floor and try and get them to submit to us. So we never really feel pent-up aggression or pent-up energy. Like, we're quite zen in general. And I think, like, in our society in general, right, it's kind of like we put all these negative connotations around like what it is, right? It's aggressive, it's violent, it's people, like, I like to use the word strategy, right? That can be used as like cunning and conniving and guile, but it's like, people with any sort of military prowess or combat ability or strategy, they were valued members of society in the classical and the those ages because they could contribute to keeping people alive.
Absolutely.
So whereas nowadays we don't have that need. So we've got this kind of like this ingrained DNA that says you should definitely be able to go and strangle your best friends. Go and wrestle them to the floor and twist their bones. They will like it. But we never get to do that until you've actually partaken in some combat sport.
Absolutely.
And you have to, that's it, right? It's not something that you can just see and then be like, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. You have to experience it. Until you've experienced it with somebody who can out wrestle you. They won't let you get back up. Then you're a believer. Yeah,
for sure. And I think it teaches you a lot about humility as well. That's something that you were talking about before, where nearly every single day that you go in, you're going to tap. And you're going to say, I can't handle anymore, but that's okay because I know my limit there. I'm just going to rework. We're going to get back at it again. And being able to tap and being able to understand those limits is something that gets people into a lot of trouble. It's because they don't know when they're pushing too far. And then they get into a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Do you find that?
Definitely. Usually with beginners.
Oh, right.
Only, I should say, with beginners and competitors.
Ah, right.
Yeah. So the general public that are coming in are usually doing it for the social aspect, the friendly environment, because we're like a little family, right? It's all, everyone's getting strangled, but everyone's loving it. So everyone's there for their own purposes. The competitors are a very small percent. People that are there for self-defense and the family atmosphere, right? Those are your main people. I think the problem solving is what I keep coming back for.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, this guy grabbed my wrist 2-on-1 and I was suddenly put in between his legs and it was a horrible time from there. So the next time he ever gets two hands on me in that situation, you have to be able to problem solve like the highest pressure Rubik's Cube you've ever solved, right? If you flip it the wrong way, you're suddenly not breathing. So you have to be able to think clearly and make good decisions. And importantly, you have to learn from them. When I was very, very early on in my jiu-jitsu career, for lack of a better word, a brown belt that I was rolling with pulled my leg underneath him and basically ankle locked me. I put my foot up the same way. He went to do it again, and I just moved it out of the way. And he said, you're the first person that's put his leg down. Everyone else just kept putting it in the same spot that he kept leading them to. And I was like, well, yeah, like, if I don't let you touch what you want, your first sequence is shut down.
Right.
And then he bit my ass anyway because he had a bunch of other sequences. But it was still like a moment where it's like, you must understand that if you're not actually paying attention to what they're effectively doing to you, then you're not engaging your brain. And a lot of it is actually problem solving on the fly.
Yeah.
You can have all the techniques in the world, but if you can't shut down their problem that they're giving you, or provide a solution to, the problem they're giving you, it's going to be a repetitive situation where you just keep doing the same thing, and insanity, right?
Yeah, exactly. A good old Einstein. And it's mixing the cognitive processes to what your body can do as well. So like the more you do it with your body, and you can see, okay, when I get into that position, this is when this could happen. But then it's like, that, but how do we then connect knowing to actually doing? And I think the more you do it.
Spot on that one. People say knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Disagree.
Right.
Application of knowledge is power. You have to, like you said, mind-body connection. You have to be able to do what you know in some regard. Obviously, otherwise it's like, you know what's going on, but it's still not working for you.
Yeah.
So applying that is the crucial part.
Absolutely.
And that's the reps. That's the mat time. That's the stuff that you only get from showing up, going through the hard yards.
Absolutely. And I think that's massive crossover to everything in life. And that's what, for those people who maybe aren't thinking about getting into this sort of stuff, there's a lot of this. You take out jiu-jitsu and you put in whatever it is you're going through in life, and they all, it's all applicable. I remember the first time, and this was something that I then applied to the rest of my life, but the first time you ran with me was, I think the key principles you taught me was that you need to know the basics, and you got me uncomfortable in a bottom position. And you had someone on top of me, and I was like telling you before, I was like, I get claustrophobic, all that sort of stuff. And that was, I remember you put me in the worst positions I could possibly be in. You're like, hey, just get into there. And then I got there, I learned how to breathe there. I was in not thinking about my claustrophobia. I just started thinking okay, so from here, how do I keep myself safe?
Exactly.
And I was like, that was the basics, and that was all. From there, it just switched my mind around thinking, what is a bad position? I was just like, no, it's not a bad position unless I have nothing to do to get out of it.
Yeah,
right?
And a lot of it's just having that direction. I think that a lot of people in very, very little time can become quite competent in jiu-jitsu as opposed to getting very good. If you have a set of directions to go for and a set of goals that you're looking for, then you're going to work towards them. And if you combine that with a bunch of, hey, never ever let this happen to you, then you've got that in the back of your mind as well. Versus a lot of people that have never been in a combative situation that ends on the floor, it's guesswork.
Yeah.
And a lot of that guesswork is we're just looking for, basically things that they're putting their arm there. They should not be happening. Let's just grab that. And vice versa. It's like people that don't know what they're doing, they do mess up. One thing I think that could be taught better within the jiu-jitsu system is self-defense.
Sure.
I think that could really be taught better because, your general public doesn't need to know how to break someone's grip if they grab you, or when you're on top of somebody, how to get an armbar from the top position. Because if you're on top of them in a self-defense situation, you're going to be hitting them in the face.
Sure.
Repetitively. And if they turn around, you're probably not going to strangle them. You're going to keep hitting them in the back of the head repetitively.
Yeah.
The self-defense side of it needs to come from when you're underneath somebody. And that was the mindset with when I worked with you and Josh. I was thinking, well, obviously, this is your worst case scenario. Claustrophobic, can't move, someone's on top of you. Start there, and then everything else is easier. Everything.
Yeah.
It's just got to have those ideas, those principles, and those, obviously, the time to apply it, because knowing how to do it and then doing it is completely different.
Yeah, for sure. And so on that, now you've got a little bit of creative direction, I guess, because you are now 50-50 in a gym.
Yes.
So you have gone pretty much all eggs in one basket to be jiu-jitsu is life.
Entirely.
Yeah,
Entirely.
Right. So tell us a little bit about that process.
Cool. So me and Nick Taylor, and if anyone knows him, he's a very successful kickboxer. He just fought in King of the Ring, which was kind of the platform for Israel Adesanya, Dan Hooker, those boys coming up. He's had I think it was 17 years of kickboxing experience, New Zealand titles, etc., etc. So he's basically running the stand-up.
Yeah.
And he's taking care of a lot of other gym admin as well. He's an incredibly proficient and talented guy. And I'm doing my side with the groundwork and the jiu-jitsu. And so basically what's happening is that we've created this gym called Apex, and we've got Dunedin Kickboxing, which is his brand, and we've got Freaks Jiu-Jitsu, which is a stem of my brand. So I'm Freaks Jiu-Jitsu New Zealand, and that's run underneath Richie Martinez and Gio Martinez. And if people don't know who that is, that's fine. But for everyone in the jiu-jitsu community, they're like, whoa, you're under those guys? Holy crap, those guys are incredible. So yeah, it's a really, really good thing because it's the only New Zealand affiliate of anyone in the 10th Planet system.
Right.
And that's kind of groundbreaking, right? No one's really got that connection. So that's really good for us. And we're just basically representing with as much pride and honor as we can. which is easy when you're as passionate about the sport as we are. And that's something I think like that our gym does like really well, is that both me and Nick are leading from the front lines.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of coaches out there that have either done it in the past or they sit behind a desk collecting the income. Whereas Nick's competing, I'm competing, and we're both trying to bring everyone in that same gym up to the level that we can all compete with them consistently, because that's all we want, right? We want a gym to just grow and get as good as they can possibly get.
Yeah.
So it comes naturally when you're trying to get your own guys as good as they can be, so that everyone can be more competitive. It's just natural.
Yeah. So, I mean, what does training look like for you then? Because you're running a gym, but you're also, you talked about earlier trying to be one of the first New Zealanders to get almost like the highest. It's a really high honor.
Yeah, it's a grappling Olympics. I think if you get to even get to ADCC, you're kind of set for life. Let alone medaling. And we have had 3 very successful Australians, 2 jump into mind more so than. But they've done what has kind of shocked the world, right? They've submitted. Lachlan Giles definitely deserves a shout out for this, is that he entered the absolute division.
Wow.
Which is no weight class, ADCC, best grapplers of the world. And he's 77 kilos.
Damn.
And he managed to submit 3 guys. One of them was like gold medalist of 99 kilos.
Yeah.
Silver medalist. It's just big boys that he was taken out, and everyone was kind of like, who's that Australian dude? And I was talking to the dude when he had like 1,000 followers. I was like, this guy's, now he's blown up on Instagram. He's doing seminars all around the place. And it's like, people kind of don't really consider New Zealand and Australia on the same level. But we are.
Sure.
And we're coming. And it's just a matter of time.
Yeah. So with your training then, and how does that all look then? Because that's a lot of dedication that you have to put into that. I know you have the mindset for it. So, I mean, strategically, what is the aim around that?
The aim is to get as good as possible within areas. Like, I think that what a lot of people don't realize is that at the level of Jiu Jitsu now, like back in the day, it was quite easy to get good because everyone wasn't all on the same level. Yeah. Whereas nowadays, you've kind of got to become competent across all of Jiu Jitsu. Then you've got to specialize, and you've got to find ways to break through the highest level of defenses. A good example that I kind of I've tried this on my guinea pigs, the white belts. I've taken some guys and I've been like, sweet. So they've been training for 3 months, some of them 6 months. And I've basically tried to get them as good as I am on the back. Okay, which is if we get into a combat situation, I get to your back. You can't really attack me, but I've got uncontested attempts at strangling you from behind you, right? And within 3 months, one of my white belts was successfully strangling purple belts.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quite impressive. It was kind of like, wow, so that was how fast you can get good if you just ignore the rest of your game, right?
Sure.
You just focus on one area. Like, granted, like you don't let him get to your back, and he's kind of like not as nowhere near as dangerous. He just moves his legs around and get on top of him and squash him. But if he does get to your back, he's like, purple belt level, quote unquote, at finishing from there. And so I think that that's kind of like where I want to go with it. Without giving too much away, I want to find like 2 or 3 areas and just make them work on everyone. Doesn't matter who they are. MMA, caliber, Jiu Jitsu, competitive caliber, everyone. Size doesn't count. So size doesn't matter. Make those 3 areas kind of like your A+ game.
Yeah.
And then you have to get to them. Yeah. You have to get to those areas when you're competing, and that's kind of the battle. That's
like when the commentators say, "Oh, you don't want Stephen to get you in the whatever that is."
Yeah, and you just hope that comes around, right? And you've got to find like these micro battles of a crazy little, like everything's like an inch or a split second in jiu-jitsu. It's everything. And Chael Sonnen said the other day, is like, if you don't think a second's a long time in fighting, it is.
Yeah.
Go and put your hand on a hot element for a second.
Yeah.
It's a long time. Just like millimeters. Like if you can create like a little bit of space, suddenly you're not passing out. The blood flow is still creeping through to your brain.
Sure.
But another millimeter in the other direction, and now you're seeing stars. So yeah, we've got to have a very good understanding. I've just basically got to try and find some X factors for myself in the game, but also make sure that I'm committing as much mat time as I know competitors will be.
Right.
And when you're running a gym, you've got to prioritize your members. Their growth is first and foremost my main priority, but I will always make sure that I'm getting my own training in.
Good on you.
It has to be done, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, then I think you're doing a disservice to everyone in that system.
It's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's nice because you know that you'll always be developing, and then at some point, like, there will never be a time where you develop that doesn't benefit everyone that's part of your team, because you can then either teach that to someone else, or someone else will see you do it and they can then help you. Like, it's just going to be this huge circle of people wanting to get better, which is something that I think you're really trying to push for.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of success with that, right? Like I was talking before about Hammerhead out in Mosgiel. We've got a very good collaborative environment where, you know, the Freaks guys are going out there to get their wrestling in with Brogan Anderson and Taylor Garrett. Two guys they're incredibly talented professional MMA fighters. And vice versa, like whenever their guys or their girls have competitions coming up, we want to put as much jiu-jitsu time in with them. And it's just a great trade-off where everyone's got the same goal. Let's get as good as possible. Who cares about politics? Who cares about whatever else everyone else is doing in the world? It's like, if you do what everyone else is doing, you get what everyone else is getting. We've got an ability through good relationships and similar goals. Yeah. Let's get as good as we can.
Yeah, now we're talking about other things and what other people think is the normal thing to do. Now, something that always makes me laugh about you, and it's just, I don't know why it's so funny, but I know you now is Stephen does jiu-jitsu and is only purple belt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why is that? Like, why has it become a big thing?
It shouldn't have become a big thing. I don't think it should have, but it is. I encountered a lot of, well, not a lot, but more negativity than I thought I would when I said we're going to start a no-gi gym. And people were saying, you can't start a no-gi gym in Dunedin, it's too small. You can't do no-gi only, like, you need to have gi. You're not a black belt, how are you going to teach people? And it got to the point where it's just like, I just ignored the negativity and just kept going, right? Like, I think that when you give... The black belt is prestigious, right? It comes with a lot of like kind of awe around it. I've been a purple belt for over 3 years. I've competed against black belts. I've submitted black belts. It's just a piece of fabric. Okay, you know what I mean? It doesn't. I think that you have to respect it to a degree, but you cannot idolize it, and you cannot make getting a belt your end goal. So, I personally am in no rush to get it right. Like when I told people that I was going to start up this gym, there was one defining moment where I was kind of like, wow, like it was heartwarming. And I said, blah, 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 blah. Hey guys, starting up a no-gi gym. This is where it'll be. And one student who wasn't there that day came and found me and he said, I heard you're moving gyms. And I said, yeah, so this is what we're going to be doing. And I was like, so yeah, man, it's like entirely up to you, like what you do. I'm just letting you know, like we're always going to have doors open. He's like, well, wherever you go, I'm going to go. Yeah. And I was like, oh, like my soul. Yeah. You know what I mean? And he was just like, it's not even an option. And there was a couple of people that were out of the country. And then when we found out that we started a gym, they were kind of like, wait, where'd Stephen, where'd Kane go? Where'd Carther go? They were like, where'd all these great guys that we were training with go? Yeah. And they had to go to other gyms around the area. And it's be like,
they're just trying to pop their head and
pop
see,
their head in
Stephen in there.
Are you looking to sign up to Jiu Jitsu? And they're like, do you know where Stephen is? do you know where those guys went? And we were kind of like, they came and found us, and that was quite nice as well. So yeah, no, again, the purple belt is kind of like, if it happens, it happens. I'm in no rush, right? Sure. Like obviously, it's a goal that's on the radar, but it's not the goal. The goal is just to represent yourself and get as much growth of combat sport and jiu-jitsu as you can. Sure. You don't need a piece of fabric to do that. Yeah.
And talking about fabric as well, you also like to make a lot of comments on some of your photos and stuff about being no-gi. Yeah. So where did this come from?
So again, it's traditional, right? Like a gi is that white karate uniform type thing, right? Yep. Now this is a piece of heavy fabric that if you just get one grip on, doesn't matter where that grip is, you now ultimately control their shoulder girdle and to some degree their head. And in a combat situation, if you can control their posture through the use of their head, their spine, it's really powerful. Without the gi, you don't have access to just reaching up and grabbing that. It's not there. So you actually have to learn how to use specific grips on their body. And again, people are like, you should train in the gi to build up your fundamentals. Well, why don't you train in no gi to build up your fundamentals? Like, perfect example of this is Liam Tosh. He'd never put a gi on. And he didn't even know how to tie his belt. And he went and took out silver in a competition. Yeah. It was like, he didn't know what he was doing. He ended up getting gi choked hilariously in the finals, but he went through and used his no-gi skills to submit everyone that he ran into throughout the way. And it's like, if he had just taken a little bit of time to understand how to use a gi. And I don't have any hate for the gi. Yeah, right. I actually, since like 2016, I've actually, every gi combo I've done, I've got gold in.
Sure.
Across intermediate, advanced, and absolute. So I'm not bad in a gi. I just don't like using it. I prefer to do no gi, and I don't know why people think that's such a bad thing.
Right.
It shouldn't be. It's not taboo. It's like if you like training in gi, cool. And on that note, if anyone's listening to this and they train in gi and they're thinking, I don't want to go to Steven's gym, bring your gi in. We've got guys that love it.
Yeah.
You know, they're always hitting me up being like, can we put our gis on? I'm like, of course you can.
Yeah.
Go and wrestle in your gi. I'm just not wearing it.
Sure.
And the majority of my instruction is in no gi because those grips are always there.
Yeah.
Always.
So this isn't one of those moments where people are like, Steven hates gi, and he hates anyone who has one.
It's definitely not one of those moments. If you're doing jiu-jitsu, you're good in my books. Right?
Yeah, right.
End of story.
Very, very good.
Yeah.
Now, you also had a bit of social media fame because you and your partner, congratulations on the proposal as well.
The engagement, thank you. Happy days.
Yeah, happy days. And you guys started Rubber Guard Couple.
Yes.
And is that still going? Still a thing?
We moved it to the Freaks JJ New Zealand page.
Right.
So we just transferred our account over.
Yeah.
Just gave it a different name.
Cool.
But people still know us as that. We put out a video the other day and someone in America was like, oh, the Rubber Guard Couple's back. And it's like, yep, we're still alive. So, yeah, no, that was quite cool. It was basically a moment where I was in rural Japan for like 5 months and I didn't have anywhere to train. Like I had to take 45-minute train and hike through the snow to get to a gym. And it was, it wasn't the highest level gym and it was gi. But so basically I ended up getting access to a dojo.
Right.
And I faked interest. It's one of my not my finest moments, but I faked interest in kendo and hapkido and all this other stuff just to get the timetable. And when I knew when it was empty, I was in there.
Right.
And me and Brooke basically just learnt ourselves through online, through footage, and then we were like, we're putting a lot of time in and we're not documenting any of it. Should we chuck a video up there, see what happens? And across the shares, I got over 200,000 views.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, 200,000 people just saw me triangle Brooke. Like, what a crazy. And this is like, I'm glad social media got rid of the likes and the views because it plays on people's minds. And yeah, it was just one of those things where someone someone who runs a page called Rubber Guard Assassins messaged me. It was like, we love you and Brooke. Do more videos for us.
Cool.
And we're like, sweet. So we just did more and basically people just kept following us. And through that kind of social media is a powerful tool.
Absolutely.
And and it's like we had contacts in America. We had places to stay. We had places to train. Throughout New Zealand, people have come up to me and they're like, hey, roll, blah, blah, blah. Want to hang out with you, want to train with you. And we've had people coming in from Nelson, from Invercargill, from Auckland, from Wellington, from Christchurch, just dropping into the gym purely because of Instagram. Our gym doesn't really have any advertising. So people are like, you should get a sign out front. I'm like, dude, the classes are packed as it is.
Yeah, they are, man. They are.
Like, as soon as I put a sign out front, we're going to have to expand downstairs, man. Like, yeah, so it's good. It's really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just on that, I mean, you're both I remember you talking about Brooke and you just like, she just wants to kill people and she doesn't she needs someone to train with and she's been training with boys so long. But now you two, you went through lockdown together and you have so much passion for jiu-jitsu. Have you struck that balance, I'm guessing, if you're...
Yeah, she's easy to strike a balance with.
Right.
She's... I think like a lot of people... I haven't listened to your podcast on relationships yet, I'm sorry, but I think a lot of people get relationships wrong.
Right. Yeah, go for it.
I do. I think they get relationships wrong. You have to be two independent people.
That's what we talk about on that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, good. So yeah, you have to. And it's like, I feel like there's so many people that are in relationships that feel like they're constantly trying to please the other person. But it's like, you have to be completely independent in the regard that it's like, you've got your own dreams, you've got your own goals, you've got your own aspirations. Your partner needs to support that. You need to support your partners. And if they line up, great, go forward together. If they're two completely different areas, support them. You know what I mean? And me and Brooke just have it super easy because our goals are the same.
Yeah.
It's like, we just like, I feel bad for her because she doesn't have any girls to train with. So if you are listening to this, come on in, quote Sick As Podcast, grab a couple of weeks for free.
And then get choked out.
Yeah, get choked out. But like, she trains with 70, 80 kilo guys all the time. And like when she finally gets to train with girls, she's like, oh my gosh, I can move her wrist. I can grab her and I can move her. And it's like, yeah. So yeah, she's taken some big steps. She's going to compete. Again, she doesn't have any goals of fame, glory, any aspirations of doing that. But she just wants to go and actually, test yourself.
That's good.
Which is great. Like, I think it's a very, very important part. Like, how much can you know about yourself if you haven't competed? You always take something away from it, win or lose. You learn something. So it's a great experience.
Absolutely.
But she's going the right way.
That's awesome. And now, just in terms of time, so before we get to the final question, you recently have basically been doing everything that freaks a lot of people out. So you've been doing your cold water plunges, and you've also just got a new pair of barefoot shoes.
Yeah, Skinners.
They're barely shoes.
The socks.
When I was looking at them, they're like that, rough socks.
Yes.
And how's that all going for you?
Great. Yeah. I figured we got to strengthen the feet up.
Yeah.
Too many years in shoes, too many years in orthotics. If you've got any sort of issues with your glutes or your knees or your hips, I think it all stems from the feet. I personally just wanted to have strong feet because they're that much more annoying for people to try and grab and break.
Absolutely.
But the running's been good, man. I've tested myself up the Pineapple and Flagstaff and around there just in the socks. You have to be aware of where you stand.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You can't just mindlessly go for a run anymore.
Yeah.
You've got to be soft. I think that you're going to get. My feet are sore. They're very, very sore. But I think that they're going to be. I'm going to get more of them, and I'm going to make it a staple part of the training.
That's awesome.
The cold's great. I did that literally before I came here.
Yeah.
1 hour not 1 hour. 1 hour before I got on this, I was 5 minutes in the water. And I think that's really good for, again, just finding another way to challenge your mind, which is what we're obviously looking for, right? Always find more challenges throughout the day, and getting in the cold water never gets easier.
Yeah, for sure. And then also before the final one, these will probably all come into your final question as well, but you've also been doing a little bit more on the breath.
Yes.
So just want to quickly touch on that?
Yeah, that stemmed from the boys at Propel. They just kept raving about it, and the breath foundation, the epicenter, I think they said, of life.
That sounds like Fraser Beck.
It does, doesn't it? It's quote unquote right there, but it's not wrong.
Yeah.
Like, obviously oxygen's incredibly important, right? And if you can take up more of it, it's a win. The more that your lungs can, I think, like if you're getting warm for like a match or something coming up, you do a few sprints, right? Your lungs have expanded. Every breath that you take now, the surface area is bigger. You're taking up more oxygen. Muscles react better. Everything fires properly. I just wanted to be in that state all the time.
Right.
So the breathing's daily. It has to be daily. I do notice it now if I don't do it.
Yeah.
But I think just like the competitive aspect of seeing how long you can hold your breath, that takes over as well.
Sure.
It cracked 4 minutes and it was kind of like, I didn't even know I'd done it. I just looked at my phone because you kind of like zone out. I looked at my phone, I was like, 4 minutes. I haven't breathed for 4 minutes. And then it gets to your head, right? You start thinking about it.
Yeah.
But it's really powerful. And I think just getting you into that meditative state, I think a lot of the most successful people in the world, they all claim they meditate. And it's like, I don't really. So I thought I might give it a try and see what,
Yeah. I really do feel like everything that you say is just to be more in touch with your body. Like the more that you can, from your brain, control any little part of your body by all the practices that you're doing, is basically once you get in control of everything, like it's over for everyone else. You're not worrying about what everyone else is going to do, but you just know that you have control and total control over everything that you do. So just before we take off, we have one final question. And I think we just touched on those last three, but is there something that you do daily or close to daily that you feel like optimizes you for the day, the week, and then hopefully the rest of the year? Yeah,
so every there's a routine, right? And it's as much as I can every day, I want to get my hips and scapulas firing where they should be. So I go through some Aloe Moves. It's a phenomenal website where you can pick your yoga exercises for the morning. That's first and foremost, right? Open up the body, stretch. It also sets up the prerequisites for everything else you're going to do. You have to do your strength and conditioning. It has to be either lifting weights for rehab, lifting weights for progress, or doing cardiovascular exercise for the same results. Then there's always your study. I think everyone in this country should, as the curriculum says, become lifelong learners. Yeah. You have to keep learning, right? It's the reason that societies stagnate and they don't go forward. If people stop thinking or start thinking they've learned it all, you're wrong, right? You need to keep learning. And so I always find some time to study. And then, of course, the combat sport, it has to be in there.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's every single day?
Every single day, but I will take a rest day on. Oh no, I trained at lunchtime today. But Wednesday evening, I don't do Jiu Jitsu on Wednesday evenings.
Yeah.
I come and talk to you.
Oh yeah, there we go. That's why, because you're prolonging the study, and now you're trying to put all that knowledge into application and speech, and then when you go move your body, you're going to do it somewhere else as well.
Spot on. And I think just on that note, consistency is key.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you do it one day, for a week, right? You have to make it habits.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. And Stephen, just before we take off, where can everyone find you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, probably Instagram, to be honest. FreaksJJNZ or Apex Gym NZ. It's just next door to Chipmunks. Walk-ins are welcome. And again, like everyone, regardless of what walk on life you're going to take, come and give it a try. You'll be amazed at what you can and what you can find out and discover about yourself and the art. So yeah, that's us.
Yeah, that's been awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen, for coming in. I have definitely, I've actually got really, really energized after that. I thought it was going to be one of those long ones. It's been a long day, but after that, I feel so much more energized and so much more, I guess, aware of things that I want to then go and do. But yeah, we'll have to be in touch, man. Thank you so much
for your time.
Take care.
Oh, what a yarn.
That was unreal.
Wasn't that good?